Welcome to OG series on human physiology. We are going to discuss original questions designed by NTA on all these chapters. Which of the following muscle disorders is inherited? So among these, muscular dystrophy is the one. The disease is called Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Now nothing much is given in the textbook. Dystrophin, only the gene size is given in molecular basis of inheritance. It is the largest gene, 2.4 million base pairs. What you should know is dystrophin is important for the integrity of muscle membrane. It connects the intracellular cytoskeleton to the extracellular matrix. So loss of this protein compromises the structure of muscle fiber. And another important point, just like color blindness and hemophilia, this is also X-linked. So most of the boys are affected compared to girls. Now different ways of electrocardiogram is given here and the events. One important point which you need to keep in mind is you will never see the wave for repolarization of atria. Because depolarization of ventricles is so strong, it hides the wave of repolarization of atria. So this is out of question. Okay, so always rule this thing out. So you have 4 and 4 to match. First one is, we will read from this end, depolarization of ventricles. It is QRS complex, B1. B1 is almost everywhere. Next is repolarization of ventricles. It is T wave. C2 is here. So B1 and C2 we will have to rule out between 1 and 2. A4 is common. So the last one is D is either 3 or 5. 5 we have ruled out, so D has to be 3. Coronary ischemia. So answer is option number 1. How does steroid hormone influence the cellular activities? These are the options. The answer is option number 2. Binding to DNA and forming the gene hormone complex. So such questions are actually easy if you remember 3 important points. Number 1, the type of hormone receptor. Is it membrane bound or is it intracellular receptor? Point number 2, when hormone binds to receptor, this complex, whether it enters or does not enter the cell. And third point, what happens after the formation of hormone receptor complex? Whether second messengers are formed or whether the complex interacts with the genome. These 3 points will give you the clarity. What are receptors? They are protein molecules to which hormone binds. Certain receptors are found on the cell membrane, and these are called membrane-bound receptors. The other category are called intracellular receptors. They are found on the organelles inside the cell. And most of them are nuclear receptors. Hormones for intracellular receptors are those that can easily pass through the cell membrane, the steroid and iodothyronin. On the other hand, membrane-bound receptors include amino acid derivatives like epinephrine and peptide, polypeptide and protein hormones like insulin, glucagon, pituitary and hypothalamic hormones. In this case, hormone receptor complex does not enter the cell. The hormone enters the cell and the hormone receptor complex enters the nucleus. Binding of hormone to receptor triggers formation of second messengers in the cytoplasm. These are CAMP, inositol triphosphate, which is called IP3, and calcium ions. These bring about the physiological changes. In case of steroid and thyroid hormones, the hormone receptor complex interacts with the genome and it directly regulates gene expression or chromosome functions. So with this background, now you can clearly understand why steroid does not affect the permeability or production of these second messengers. Okay, this is the right answer. Select the correct sequence for transport of sperm cells in the male reproductive system. Option 2 is the answer. I would recommend you to watch this video. It's a 3D animation video explaining the pathway of sperm. You can actually visualize every detail. The link is in the description. This is the screenshot from the same video. This shows seminiferous tubules. Now tubule indicates the tubes have very small diameter. You can notice here the outer region has stem cells which form the spermatogonia, and spermatogonia undergoes spermatogenesis to form spermatids. Spermatids are round, they are not motile, so they undergo another round of a process which is called spermiogenesis, and finally they have a tail, they are motile now. So developmental process happens from outer to inner region. This is the lumen, this is a cavity here. Keep in mind the spermatozoa will never come out from this region. They are not supposed to come in the interstitial region. They will always move in the lumen and further down to rete testis. So these are the tubules, seminiferous tubules. They are highly coiled, okay, arranged in these testicular lobules. So spermiation, just like ovulation, sounds similar. They both means release of the gamete from the original source of production. So spermatozoa will move out through the lumen, okay, not from the outer region. Through the lumen into rete testis. Rete testis will join into vasa efferentia, followed by epididymis, and this is vas deferens. Now similar image in NCERT textbook shows seminiferous tubule here. This is rete testis, this is vasa efferentia, epididymis, and then vas deferens. Vas deferens will then merge with the duct from seminal vesicle, so it will form ejaculatory duct. Now this is the ejaculatory duct, this is ureter, and this is prostate gland. Now at the time of ejaculation, prostate gland undergoes contractions and it will squeeze the ureter. And this is the reason why semen never get mixed up with urine, even though the duct is common for both these. And then the terminal part of urethra is called urethral meatus. Now we see the option once again. What would be the heart rate of a person if the cardiac output is 5 liters? Blood volume in the ventricle at the end of diastole is 100 ml and at the end of ventricular systole is 50 ml. So what is given? Cardiac output, which is 5 liter. That is directly given. Cardiac output is 5 liters. Next, stroke volume. Is it given? No. So certain values are given and you will have to calculate stroke volume. How do you do that? So check the values. Diastolic volume in ventricles is 100 ml. Systolic volume in ventricles is 50 ml. So that means 50 ml, 100 minus 50, 50 ml is pumped out by ventricles, and that is the stroke volume. Now what do you have to find? You need to find the heart rate. So the formula which you're going to use is cardiac output is equal to heart rate multiplied by stroke volume. This is the volume of blood pumped out by ventricles at the end of one cardiac cycle, multiplied by number of times cardiac cycle happens in a minute will give you the volume of blood pumped by heart in a minute. We need to calculate heart rate, so we will rearrange this formula. Heart rate becomes cardiac output divided by stroke volume. So substitute values in this formula. So you will have to first match the unit. So 5 liters becomes 5000 ml per minute divided by 50 ml. This becomes 100 per minute. So 100 per minute is the heart rate. Check the options. Option 3 is the right answer. Which of the following factors is responsible for the formation of concentrated urine? Low levels of antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic works against dilution. So if the levels are low, how will it help in concentration? So first is wrong. Maintaining hyperosmolarity towards inner medullary interstitium in the kidney. Yes, this is correct. Secretion of erythropoietin, this is not relevant here. Hydrostatic pressure during glomerular filtration, this is not going to help in concentration. So right answer is option 2. Okay, so let's understand this in detail. So think in very simple terms. What is concentration of urine? Concentration simply means removal of water. If you recall what you have studied in lower classes, if you put a cell in hypertonic solution, water moves into the cell causing bursting, and if you put the same cell in hypertonic solution, water moves out. So water has this inherent tendency to move towards solute of high concentration. So high solute concentration is maintained by kidney, specifically the juxtamedullary nephrons. This diagram shows cortical nephron and juxtamedullary nephron. If you compare the loop of Henle, this is very short, but in this case the loop of Henle goes deep down in the interstitium, and the red tubules are vasa recta. This countercurrent mechanism helps to create this concentration gradient. Okay, so filtrate moves from PCT into the loop of Henle, then DCT, collecting tubule and collecting duct. Now at this point of time, pituitary produces antidiuretic hormone, and this is going to open channels here. Now because of the natural tendency of water to move towards high concentration gradient, it will move out. So high levels of ADH as well as high osmolarity both help in concentration of urine. Which of the following contraceptive methods do involve a role of hormone? Lactation amenorrhea? Yes, due to lactation, the gonadotropins are not released, so it in turn blocks the menstrual cycle. Progestogens and estrogens? This is also a combination of progestogen and estrogen. So we have the answer. Let's rule out other options. Barrier method? Yes, there's no hormone involved here. CUT, again copper, no hormone. And pills, emergency, and barrier method once again. So the right answer is option number 1. Next, select the hormone releasing IUD. So we have 3 categories of IUD. Balls are not IUD, so this is wrong. So multi-load is not hormone releasing. Progestasert and LG20, yes, this is the answer. Lip slope again is non-medicated IUD. So option 3 is the right answer. Use of an artificial kidney during hemodialysis may result in A. Nitrogenous waste buildup in the body. See, the very purpose of dialysis is to remove nitrogenous waste. So this is absolutely wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. Non-elimination of excess potassium ion. Again, hemodialysis is supposed to remove excess ions. This is wrong. So the answer is C and D. These are correct. Option 3. So just in case if you don't happen to know option C, this is a perfect example of how you can arrive at the right answer by eliminating the wrong ones. So let's understand option C and D. If kidneys are non-functional, it will lead to reduced absorption of calcium ions from gastrointestinal tract. How is this statement correct? For this, you will have to understand a little bit about how vitamin D is produced in our body. We all know sunlight is essential for synthesis of vitamin D in our skin. The precursor molecule is cholesterol, the most hated molecule, and also the most misunderstood molecule, the most important molecule in our body, cholesterol. So sunlight will convert this molecule into cholecalciferol. Next step, this is hydroxylated in liver. Then third step is another round of hydroxylation to form 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol, and this happens in kidney using the enzyme 1-alpha hydroxylase. This is the active form of vitamin D. Well, sounds like calcium. It doesn't have calcium in its structure. It is just another modified structure of cholesterol. And just like steroid hormones, it has intracellular receptor. It has the ability to modulate gene expression, and it induces expression of special transporters called calbindin. So this is a transporter protein. It expresses on the surface of intestinal cells and it will bind to calcium, which we consume in our diet, and helps in absorption. So indirectly, kidney plays an important role by producing the active form of vitamin D. And next statement was reduced RBC production. This will stimulate erythropoiesis, which is formation of RBC. So if kidney is non-functional, the hormone will not be produced and it is going to affect RBC production. Extrusion of second polar body from egg nucleus occurs. First option is the right answer. See, fertilization event involves first the sperm head enters the oocyte cell membrane and then the nucleus is released into the cytoplasm. So once the nucleus is inside egg's cytoplasm, it is called pronucleus. So during this process, simultaneously the secondary oocyte undergoes and completes meiosis too. See, secondary oocyte is haploid because it has undergone the first phase of meiosis. Okay? The second phase of meiosis is important because each chromosome has another sister chromatid attached to it. Okay? So each chromosome will have 2 p arm and 2 q arm. This means that each chromosome has double the amount of DNA. This is going to produce anomaly in the zygote. So you need to get rid of this extra chromatids. Okay? The secondary oocyte nucleus, which is already in metaphase 2 arrest, will progress into anaphase 2. So that means the chromosomes which have the extra DNA, okay, so this is already in metaphase 2 arrest. It looks something like this. The assembly is ready. Okay, now during anaphase, the centromere will divide and this is going to separate the chromatids. After anaphase, the chromosomes will move to the opposite pole. This chromosome will retain maximum cytoplasm and the other chromosome will receive very little cytoplasm, and this is going to form the polar body. And then once the meiosis 2 is completed, this will have haploid set of chromosome and they will initiate mitosis process, which are called cleavages. So production of second polar body cannot happen after fertilization because in this case the zygote will receive double the amount of DNA and this is going to create anomaly in zygote's function. Before entry of sperm into ovum, this will be waste of energy in case fertilization doesn't happen. The reason is same as for the second one. The excess DNA will be detrimental for the health of zygote. So the right answer is option number 1. Addison's disease. This is due to low levels of corticoids. So C is 1. So C1 is in option 3 and 4. Next is diabetes insipidus. Insipidus is because of ADH or vasopressin. You don't see it anywhere. So that means if 2 is present, that option will be wrong. So option 4 is wrong. Right answer is option 3. Let's cross check other matches also. Acromegaly is high levels of growth hormone, D3. Goiter is low level of thyroxine, B4. And diabetes mellitus is low levels of insulin, A5. So this is confirmed right answer. Next, select the correct option. 8th, 9th, 10th pairs of ribs articulate directly with sternum. This is incorrect. They articulate with 7th rib. They are called false ribs. 11th, 12th pair of ribs are connected to the sternum with the help of hyaline cartilage. They are not connected ventrally. This is also wrong. Each rib is a flat thin bone and all the ribs are connected dorsally to thoracic vertebrae and ventrally to the sternum. All are connected to thoracic vertebrae, this is correct, but all are not connected to sternum. This is the reason the statement will be incorrect. Okay, the all does not apply for ventral connection. And last one has to be the right answer. There are 7 pairs of vertebrosternal, 3 pairs of vertebrochondral and 2 pairs of vertebral ribs. Correct. Option 4 is the answer. So you need to remember this table. 1 to 7th ribs are called true ribs, okay? And in terms of their connection, they're connected to vertebrae as well as sternum. Then 8th, 9th and 10th are called false ribs. They are only connected to thoracic vertebrae, but they are not connected to sternum. Instead, they are connected to the 7th rib. And 11th and 12th are only connected to thoracic vertebrae, and they are not connected to even 7th rib. These are called floating ribs, okay? And another important point is bicephalic. What do you mean by bicephalic? Ribs have two articulation surfaces on its dorsal end, so are called bicephalic. That means they are connected to the vertebra by two articulating surfaces. Presence of which of the following conditions in urine are indicative of diabetes mellitus? So diabetes mellitus is related to low levels of insulin. Diabetes mellitus is a metabolic disorder, an endocrine disorder in which the body is unable to utilize glucose. So renal calculi is out of question because this is kidney stones, nephrolithiasis, not related to glucose metabolism, and even uremia is also not related to glucose metabolism. So right answer will be option 1. In diabetes mellitus, without sufficient insulin, which is secreted by beta islets of Langerhans from pancreas, the cells cannot readily take up glucose from bloodstream, leading to high blood sugar levels. So hyperglycemia is characteristic feature of diabetes mellitus. In addition, glycosuria is seen. What is this condition? Proximal convoluted tubules of kidney usually reabsorbs all glucose. But in diabetes mellitus, the levels cross the renal threshold. So renal threshold is the amount of sugar which PCTs can easily reabsorb. But since the levels are already so high, the extra glucose pass into the urine. So glycosuria means presence of glucose in urine. Another term which was seen in the option was ketonuria, presence of ketone bodies in urine. Now this happens because cell starts to use lipids and fats, and product of fat metabolism are these ketone bodies, 2-hydroxybutyrate, acetoacetate, acetone, and these waste products are detected in urine. So right answer will be option 1. Placenta, androgen, HCG, layer of ovum, lubrication of penis. So placenta is HCG. It secretes human chorionic gonadotropin hormone in pregnant females. So A is 2. A2 is only in option number 2. Zona pellucida is a layer of the ovum. B is 3. Bulbourethral gland. This is part of male reproductive system. It helps in lubrication of the penis. C is 4. And D, Leydig cells. They are interstitial cells. They secrete androgen, testosterone. So D1. So this is confirmed answer. Next question. In which of the following techniques the embryos are transferred to assist those females who cannot conceive? So before attempting this question, let's go through the concept. Embryo transfer involves either the zygote or embryo. So embryo have more cells. A zygote divides mitotically. Okay, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. So these are called blastomeres. So zygote or 8-celled embryo are transferred in the fallopian tube. On the other hand, 16-celled embryo is transferred in the uterus. Okay, so this transfer is called ZIFT, zygote intrafallopian transfer. This T is not for tube, it is for transfer. And 16-celled embryo or more are transferred in the uterus. The term is IUT, intrauterine transfer. So ZIFT and IUT, they come under embryo transfer. Now let's look at the options. ICSI, this is intracytoplasmic sperm injection. It is not embryo transfer. This is in vitro fertilization technique. Now again ICSI has come, so this cannot be the answer. ZIFT and IUD, this is the answer. In GIFT, G stands for gamete, and gamete are not embryos. So this is also wrong. Right answer is option number 3. Select the correct events that occur during inspiration. Contraction of diaphragm. Yes, diaphragm contracts. So normally it is dome shaped. After contraction it becomes flat, and this helps to increase the pulmonary volume. So A is correct. So wherever you see A, that will be the answer. 2 will not be the answers and 4 will not be. See, B is common here. So we have to only rule out D. Intrapulmonary pressure increases. Increases is wrong. Intrapulmonary pressure decreases. And this is the reason air gushes in when there is increase in the pulmonary volume. So D definitely is wrong. The right answer is A and B. Now this is very important concept. So I will go back to the image given in NCERT textbook. Okay. So diaphragm in relaxed state is dome shaped. So when it contracts, this is going to increase the volume because it becomes flat and it increases the volume in this axis is called antero-posterior axis. So contraction of diaphragm is going to increase the volume in this direction. Then simultaneously external intercostal muscles, they also contract. So what is going to happen? The volume will increase in this direction. What is this direction called? It is called dorsoventral axis. From vertebra to sternum, this axis is called dorsoventral axis. So contraction of diaphragm and contraction of intercostal muscles both leads to increase in the total pulmonary volume. So keep in mind these two axes. This is also very important. So they can design a question and ask you in which direction the pulmonary volume increases when external intercostal muscles contract, or in which direction the pulmonary volume increases when diaphragm contracts. Okay, so keep in mind these two axes. So the options are, so see, A and B are contractions of diaphragm and contractions of external intercostal muscles. Pulmonary volume increases, not decreases, and intrapulmonary pressure decreases. The QRS complex in standard ECG represents, this is a straightforward question. QRS is depolarization of ventricles. So let's use this question as an opportunity to revise the whole topic. The machine which helps you record the electrical activity is called electrocardiograph. On the other hand, the graphical representation of electrical activity of the heart during a cardiac cycle is called electrocardiogram. So patient is connected to the machine via 3 electrical leads, 2 on each wrist and 1 on left ankle. This is the electrocardiogram representing different peaks: P wave, QRS wave, T wave. So number 1, P wave represents depolarization of atria. This is followed by contraction of atria. So there is a time delay between these two events. The reason is electrical signals, they travel very fast compared to actual contractions of muscle. So QRS peak represents depolarization of ventricles. And just like atria, contractions of ventricle will begin after the Q wave. The contraction starts shortly after Q. Then T wave represents return of the ventricles from excited to normal state. And end of T wave indicates end of ventricular systole. So how does ECG helps to determine the heartbeat? You simply have to count the number of QRS complexes in a given period of time. So this is important. ECG obtained from different individuals have roughly the same shape. Okay, this is the basis of diagnosis, and any deviation in the peaks will indicate any abnormality in heart functions. So let's quickly revise it. P wave indicates depolarization of both atria. Atrial systole begins after P wave. QRS wave indicates depolarization of both ventricles. Ventricular systole begins after Q wave. P wave indicates repolarization of ventricles. Which wave indicates repolarization of atria? There is no wave because the repolarization of atria is masked by massive QRS wave. What does small t wave indicates? It indicates coronary ischemia. So this is the P wave of next cycle. So what does TP interval indicates? It indicates that heart is electrically silent. Floating ribs. 11th and 12th are called floating ribs. Located between 2nd and 7th rib, no. Head of humerus, clavicle. Do not connect with sternum. Yes, A is 4. A4 is only in option number 2. So this is the right answer. Acromion articulates with clavicle. B3. Scapula is located between 2nd and 7th ribs. And glenoid cavity is where the head of the humerus articulates. Identify the wrong statement with reference to transport of oxygen. So, high H+ concentration in alveoli favors the formation of oxyhemoglobin. This is wrong because low H+ concentration favors formation of oxyhemoglobin. So we have the answer. Okay, the factors which favors formation of oxyhemoglobin are high PO2 and rest are all low. Low PCO2, low H+ concentration and low temperature. On the other hand, in the tissue, we need the oxygen to dissociate from hemoglobin. Then only it will diffuse into the tissues. So there the PO2 is low and rest of the factors are high. High PCO2, high H+ concentration and high temperature. Next one, cuboidal epithelium with brush border of microvilli is found in. This is also straightforward question. This is in proximal convoluted tubule. Yes, first option is the right answer. So this favors reabsorption of important glucose and amino acids, all the nutrients from PCT. Next question. Meiotic division of the secondary oocyte is completed. It is completed at the time of fertilization. After zygote formation, no. At the time of fusion of sperm with an ovum, yes, this is correct. Prior to ovulation, no. At the time of copulation, no. Option 2 is the right answer. So another question on the same topic was asked before and I have discussed it in this video. It will really help you to understand why second polar body formation is important and how it helps in dividing the DNA equally. Identify the wrong statement with reference to the gene I that controls ABO blood groups. When IA and IB are present together, they express same type of sugar. This is absolutely wrong because the sugars are different and therefore the blood groups are different. So we have the answer. Option 1 is the answer. Let's go through other statements. Allele small I does not produce any sugar. Correct. The gene capital I has 3 alleles. Yes. This is the reason why ABO blood group system is an example of multiple allelism and codominance. Both are codominant. Then last statement, a person will have only 2 of the 3 alleles. Yes, because every person is diploid. The person receives 1 allele from father and 1 from mother, paternal and maternal alleles. So every person will have only 2 alleles out of 3. Okay, so in this video, I will explain you these 2 statements. What is the meaning of allele I does not produce any sugar and these 2 produce different sugars? Let's understand that. So this is RBC. Individual with O blood group, they have this basic structure. Okay, these are hexose sugars. These are galactose and this one is N-acetyl glucosamine and this one is fucose. So the statement says O blood group or the small I allele does not produce any sugar. That is correct. There are no sugars, extra sugars attached to this basic structure. So individuals with A blood group, they have this basic structure And this particular allele, it codes for an enzyme, and that enzyme adds a sugar group. Okay, this sugar group is N-acetyl galactosamine. In case of B blood group, IB allele codes for a different enzyme, and that enzyme will add only galactose on the basic structure. So this is the difference between O blood group, A blood group, and B blood group. Individuals with AB blood group will have both the alleles of both the antigens. This one galactose and this one N-acetyl galactosamine. Both will be present. Select the option including all sexually transmitted diseases. AIDS is sexually transmitted. Malaria and filaria, these are vector transmitted. So this is wrong. Cancer is not a sexually transmitted disease. Gonorrhea, syphilis, genital herpes. Yes, this is the answer. Filaria, syphilis, cancer. Cancer again is not STD. So option 3 is the right answer. For NEET exam, this is the list of sexually transmitted diseases you need to by heart. Gonorrhea, syphilis, genital warts, chlamydiasis, trichomoniasis, hepatitis B, genital herpes, and HIV. Out of these are total 8 different diseases. 5 are curable. Okay, so you can also get another question in which they will give the list and ask you which diseases are curable. So 5 are curable. The reason is, in these, the pathogenic microorganism does not integrate with the genome of host tissue, and therefore you can completely cure the disease. On the other hand, hepatitis B, genital herpes virus, and HIV, these 3 viruses have the ability to integrate into host genome, and once they are integrated in the genome, it is difficult to identify and get rid of them. So 3 diseases out of 8 are not curable and 5 are curable. This is very important topic. It is frequently asked. Which of the following would help in prevention of diuresis? First point, atrial natriuretic factor causes vasoconstriction. Is this statement correct? No, this is not correct, because ANF causes vasodilation. And next point, does it help in prevention of diuresis? No, it promotes diuresis. Next one, decrease in secretion of renin by JG cells. There is no decrease, there is increase in secretion. So let's understand the role of renin. Renin is secreted by JG cells, juxtaglomerular cells. Why? Because these cells will sense a fall in GFR. Okay? Low blood flow to kidneys will stimulate renin release. Now renin will act on angiotensinogen. As the name suggests, this will produce angiotensin 1. Now another enzyme called ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme, will convert it into angiotensin 2. Now this is very important molecule. It has 3 different effects. The first one is on blood vessels. As the name suggests, angiotensin, that means it will constrict the small blood vessels, the arterioles and capillaries, and cause vasoconstriction, and this will help to bring back the blood pressure to normal. Second thing, this is going to stimulate adrenal glands to secrete aldosterone. Aldosterone in turn enhances reabsorption of sodium and water from distal tubules of kidney. And finally, this molecule angiotensin 2 will stimulate pituitary gland to secrete ADH. So overall, this whole system will help to increase the blood volume and restore the blood pressure to normalcy. Then third option is more water reabsorption due to undersecretion of ADH. Undersecretion is wrong. ADH, as the name suggests, antidiuretic hormone. This is going to prevent diuresis. It helps to save water in our body. So fourth option has to be the right answer. Reabsorption of sodium and water from renal tubules due to aldosterone. This is correct. Match question. Pituitary gland, it will be diabetes insipidus. A3 in 1 and 4. Then thyroid B is 1. B1. So option number 1 is the answer. Next question. Select the correct statement. Insulin acts on pancreatic cells and adipocytes. Pancreatic cells secrete insulin and it acts on muscles and adipocytes. So this is incorrect. Next. Insulin is associated with hyperglycemia. Insulin deficiency is associated with hyperglycemia. So this is also wrong. Next one. Glucocorticoids stimulate gluconeogenesis. This is correct. And last one. Glucagon is associated with hypoglycemia. No. Deficiency of glucagon is associated with hypoglycemia. So this is also wrong. So these two hormones are secreted by pancreas and glucocorticoids by adrenal cortex. What is common among these three is they are involved in glucose homeostasis. So one by one we will go through function of each. First one, glucagon. This is a peptide hormone. It is released when sugar levels go below normal. Okay? And to restore glucose levels, this is going to stimulate glycogenolysis. Lysis of glycogen. Glycogen is a polymer of glucose. So when it is broken down, glucose will be released into blood and this will increase the blood sugar levels. In addition, it is going to synthesize new glucose molecule. Gluconeogenesis is generation of new glucose molecule. And lastly, it reduces the cellular glucose uptake and utilization. So insulin works other way around. It is secreted when sugar levels go above the normal levels. It acts mainly on hepatocytes and adipocytes and it stimulates conversion of glucose to glycogen. So glucose from the blood will be converted to glycogen or it will be taken up by the cells for metabolism. And lastly, glucocorticoids, they stimulate gluconeogenesis. They also stimulate lipolysis and proteolysis. So they help in increasing the blood sugar level. Which of the following hormone levels will cause release of ovum, ovulation from the Graafian follicle? So the answer will be luteinizing hormone. Let's check. Low concentration of LH. So luteinizing hormone, high concentration will help in ovulation. Low is wrong. Next one. Low concentration of FSH. Follicle stimulating hormone will help in the growth of the Graafian follicle. So at the time of ovulation, FSH will be high, not low. This is wrong. See, if you check the graph, FSH and LH, they both shoot up. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. It helps in follicle growth. So how can this be low? So this is also wrong. Option 2 is wrong. Then third option, high concentration of estrogen. So as the follicle goes through different stages of maturation, primary follicle, secondary follicle, tertiary follicle and Graafian follicle, it produces estrogen. So by the time Graafian follicle is fully matured, the concentration of estrogen will also be high. So option 3 is the right answer. If you check the graph, this is the pattern you're going to see. Estrogen will be high at the time of ovulation, day 14. So this is correct. And regarding progesterone, high concentration of progesterone, no. This will happen later. Once the ovulation happens, the ruptured Graafian follicle is called corpus luteum and it secretes progesterone. So progesterone levels does not increase at the time of ovulation. So this is wrong. So the right answer for this question is option number 3.